Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the strange blue planet grow larger on the screen. 6 months ago, humanity had received its first message from space. The beings called themselves the Valoran, and they wanted to meet. "Take us into orbit, pilot," Jake said to Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez at the controls. His heart beat fast with excitement. Today would change everything for the human race. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her computer. She was the best scientist Earth had for studying alien life. "The readings are incredible, Commander. Their cities pulse with some kind of energy we've never seen before." Officer Ryan Burke adjusted his uniform. As the cultural expert, he would help humans and aliens understand each other. "Remember, everyone, we're not just representing Earth today. We're representing all of humanity." The USS Defiance landed on the moon called Kepler 442b. The Valoran had built a beautiful settlement there just for this meeting. As the ship's doors opened, Jake stepped out and saw them for the first time. The Valoran were tall and thin, almost like living crystals. Their skin glowed with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Their leader, an elder named Threndal, walked forward with arms spread wide in greeting. "Welcome, friends from Earth," Threndal said. His voice sounded like music in their minds. The Valoran could speak without moving their mouths, sending thoughts directly to other beings. Jake smiled and extended his hand. "Thank you for inviting us. I'm Commander Morrison, and these are my people." The first meeting went better than anyone had hoped. The Valoran were gentle and kind. They showed the humans their healing crystals that could fix any injury. They shared their knowledge of the stars and told stories of their peaceful way of life. In return, the humans showed them Earth technology. Lisa demonstrated how human machines could build and create. Ryan shared human art and music. The Valoran were fascinated by human emotions and creativity. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The settlement on Kepler 442b became humanity's first home among the stars. Captain Amy Rodriguez, now promoted to oversee the cultural exchange, watched her crew members form real friendships with the aliens. "Look at Danny," Amy said to Jake one evening. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster sat with 3 young Valoran, teaching them to play chess. The aliens laughed with joy each time they learned a new move. "And look at Lisa," Jake replied. Dr. Carter was working with Valoran healers, learning how their crystal technology could help sick humans. "She's happier than I've ever seen her." The Valoran children were especially wonderful. They would run up to human visitors and share pictures they drew with their light fingers. Elder Threndal had become like a grandfather to many of the crew members, always ready with wise words and warm greetings. "You humans are remarkable," Threndal told Jake one day. "You feel so much, so deeply. It makes you strong in ways we never imagined." Jake felt proud of his species. Maybe humans were more violent than the Valoran, but they were also more passionate, more creative. "We're learning a lot from you too, Elder. Your people have shown us what peace really looks like." The settlement grew. More humans came to learn from the Valoran. More Valoran came to experience human culture. It seemed like the start of a beautiful friendship between 2 very different species, but the peace was not meant to last. On a day that started like any other, the sensors on the USS Defiance began screaming warnings. Amy rushed to the bridge, where Jake was already studying the readings. "What is it?" she asked. "Ships," Jake said grimly. "Big ones. And they're not human or Valoran." The fleet that appeared in the sky was dark and menacing. The ships looked like metal claws reaching toward the planet. They moved in perfect formation, showing military discipline that made Jake's stomach turn. "Cold. This is Admiral Crix of the Zephyrian Empire," a harsh voice announced over all communication channels. "This system now belongs to us. All beings will submit or be destroyed. Jake tried to respond, but the transmission cut off. The Zephyrian. Ships moved toward the settlement like hungry wolves. Get everyone to the shelters, Jake ordered. Danny, get your security team ready. This is not a drill. Lieutenant Colonel Foster had only 20 soldiers to protect the entire settlement. The Valoran had no weapons because they had never needed them. They were a peaceful people who solved problems with words and understanding. We can't fight them, Threndal said sadly. We don't know how. Then we'll teach you, Danny replied, but even he knew it was hopeless. 20 human soldiers and a few hundred peaceful aliens against an entire war fleet. The attack began at dawn. Zephyrian soldiers dropped from the sky like deadly rain. They wore black armor and carried weapons that could kill with a single shot. They moved through the settlement with cold efficiency. Jake watched in horror from the USS Defiance as the Zephyrians herded Valoran families into the town center. Men, women, and children were forced to kneel while the enemy soldiers stood over them with weapons ready. We have to do something, Amy said, tears in her eyes. We can't, Jake replied, his voice breaking. They'll destroy the ship and kill everyone. Admiral Crix himself appeared on the screen, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. Let this be a lesson to any who would challenge the Zephyrian Empire. We do not tolerate threats. They're not threats. Jake shouted. They're peaceful. Exactly, Crix said. Their psychic abilities make them dangerous. We eliminate all potential threats. What happened next would haunt Jake Morrison for the rest of his life. The Zephyrians executed every Valoran in the settlement. Men, women, children, elders, no one was spared. They killed them quickly and without mercy, like farmers slaughtering cattle. Elder Threndal was among the last to die. Even as the weapon pointed at him, he sent one final thought to the humans watching from their ship. Remember us with love, not hate. Do not let our deaths make you like them. Then the gentle old being who had become like family to so many humans was gone forever. The Zephyrian fleet left as quickly as it had come, leaving only death and destruction behind. Jake and his crew were allowed to live, but only so they could carry the message back to Earth. Tell your people what happens to those who associate with our enemies, Admiral Crix said before departing. The Zephyrian Empire shows no mercy to anyone. As the USS Defiance prepared for the long journey home, Jake looked out at the ruined settlement one last time. The buildings were destroyed, the beautiful crystals shattered, the peaceful people gone forever. They're going to pay for this, Amy said quietly. Jake nodded, feeling something cold and hard growing in his chest. Yes, they are. The journey back to Earth would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to plan. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks for the news to spread and for humanity to learn what monsters looked like. The Zephyrians thought they had sent a message of fear. Instead, they had just awakened something in humanity that would shake the entire galaxy. The message reached Earth 3 weeks after the massacre. President Helen Brooks stood in the emergency session of the United Nations, her hands shaking as she held the report from the USS Defiance. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice barely steady. I have received word from our diplomatic mission to the Valoran people. She paused, taking a deep breath. They are all dead. Every last one of them. The room fell silent. Representatives from every nation on Earth stared at her in shock. Dr. Marcus Webb, the military advisor, felt his blood turn to ice. The Zephyrian Empire killed them all, Helen continued. Men, women, children. They slaughtered an entire peaceful species just to send us a message. She activated the screen behind her. Video footage from the USS Defiance showed the Zephyrian attack. The room watched in horror as alien soldiers executed Valoran families in the town center. When Elder Threndal's death appeared on screen, several representatives began to cry. "This is what we're dealing with," Helen said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "This is the enemy that thinks they can intimidate humanity." The Chinese representative stood up first. "China pledges all military resources to this cause." The Russian delegate followed. "Russia will provide every weapon and soldier we have." One by one, every nation in the United Nations made the same promise. Countries that had been enemies for decades suddenly forgot their differences. The European Union, the African Federation, the American Republic, all united by a single emotion. Rage. Dr. Webb had studied warfare for 30 years, but he had never seen anything like this. "Mr. President," he said to Helen after the meeting, "what's happening to us? Every conflict on Earth just stopped overnight." Helen looked out the window at the crowds gathering in the streets. People from every nation were demanding action. "I think we're seeing what humans really are when something we love is taken from us." The news spread across every human colony. In space, on Mars, General Patricia Cole immediately began mobilizing the colonial fleet. On the Moon, engineer Tony Martinez started converting mining equipment into weapons. On Europa, the research stations began developing new technologies for war, but the most important changes were happening in the hearts of ordinary humans. In New York, a factory worker named Mike Johnson quit his job to join the military. In Tokyo, a teacher named Sarah Kim signed up for combat training. In London, a doctor named Ben Davis began studying Zephyrian biology to find their weaknesses. The survivors of the massacre became the first members of a new military unit. Sergeant Kevin Adams, who had watched his Valoran friends die, volunteered to lead the unit. "We're going to hunt down every single one of them," he told his fellow survivors. "For Threndel, for all of them." Commander Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral overnight. The government needed someone who had seen the enemy up close. "I need every ship we have," he told Helen, "and I need them armed for war." "You'll have them," she replied, "whatever you need." Captain Amy Rodriguez was assigned to train new pilots. She worked 18 hours a day, teaching young men and women how to fly in combat. "The Zephyrians fight with discipline and formation," she told her students. "We're going to fight with heart and fury." But the real changes were happening in the minds of human scientists and engineers. Dr. Lisa Carter, traumatized by watching her Valoran friends die, threw herself into weapons research. She began developing new technologies that combined human creativity with alien science. "We're not just building weapons," she told her team. "We're building hope. Hope that monsters can be stopped." The first response came from Admiral Betty Lewis, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. She sent a message directly to the Zephyrian Empire, broadcast on every frequency they could find. "This is Admiral Lewis of the Human Defense Force," she said, her voice cold as space. "You wanted to show us what monsters look like. Message received. Now we're going to show you what monsters we can become when you hurt the people we love." The message was only 30 seconds long, but it spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species who had suffered under Zephyrian rule began to whisper among themselves. The humans were fighting back. In the months that followed, humanity transformed itself. Dr. Webb watched in amazement as his species revealed abilities he had never imagined. Human factories worked around the clock. Human scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough. Human soldiers trained with an intensity that bordered on madness. "We're not the same species we were 6 months ago," he told Helen one evening. "The massacre changed us at a fundamental level." "Is that good or bad?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know one thing. The galaxy is about to find out what happens when you make humans angry." The first human warship rolled off the production line 2 months after the massacre. It was called the USS Vengeance, and it was unlike any ship ever built. Human engineers had taken alien technology and combined it with human ingenuity to create something entirely new. Captain Chris Morgan was chosen to command the Vengeance. He had lost his brother in the Valoran settlement, and his crew could see the controlled rage in his eyes. "We're not going to fight like other species," he told them. "We're going to fight like humans." The ship's weapons were a combination of human creativity and alien science. Mining lasers had been converted into ship killers. Construction robots had been turned into boarding troops. Even the ship's medical bay had been redesigned to keep soldiers fighting longer. But the most important weapon was something that couldn't be built in a factory. It was the fury that burned in every human heart. The rage that came from watching innocent people die. The determination that came from knowing that monsters existed and had to be stopped. More ships followed the Vengeance. The USS Retribution, commanded by Captain Nancy Powell. The USS Justice, under Captain Steve Harrison. Each ship was crewed by men and women who had seen the footage of the massacre and sworn to make it right. The training facilities on Mars became legendary. Soldiers from every human colony came to learn new ways of fighting. They studied Zephyrian tactics and developed counters for them. They learned to use human unpredictability as a weapon. Colonel Sandra Mitchell created the first handbook for fighting alien enemies. "Remember," she told her trainees, "they expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender. They've never fought a species that gets stronger when it's angry." The Zephyrian Empire began to take notice. Admiral Crix received reports of human military activity with growing concern. "They're mobilizing faster than any species we've ever encountered," his intelligence officer reported. "Let them come," Crix replied. "We'll crush them like we crushed the Valoran." But privately, he was worried. The Zephyrians had conquered dozens of worlds, and they always followed the same pattern. They would attack, the enemy would surrender, and the Empire would grow stronger. This time felt different. Humans weren't surrendering. They weren't even negotiating. They were preparing for war with a dedication that seemed almost insane. On Earth, President Brooks addressed the planet one more time. "My fellow humans," she said, "we are no longer the species we were before the massacre. We have learned that there is true evil in the universe. We have learned that innocent people can be killed for no reason other than cruelty." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "But we have also learned something else. We have learned that when humans are pushed too far, we don't break. We become something stronger, something the galaxy has never seen before." The broadcast ended with footage of the new human fleet assembling in space. Hundreds of ships, each. One carrying soldiers who had volunteered to fight for people they had never met. Men and women who were willing to die to prevent another massacre dock in the depths of space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching the fleet grow larger each day. Each ship that joined them brought more hope, more strength, more determination. "Are we ready?" Amy Rodriguez asked him. Jake thought about Elder Thryndall's last words. The old Valoran had asked them to remember with love, not hate. But love and hate weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same coin. The love they felt for their fallen friends was exactly what gave them the strength to hate their enemies. "We're ready," he said. "It's time to show the Zephyrians what they've awakened." The human fleet began to move toward Zephyrian space. Behind them, they left a changed Earth. Ahead of them waited an empire that had never lost a war. Neither side knew that they were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their tactics. It was their refusal to let evil win. The first battle happened at the edge of Zephyrian space. Captain Chris Morgan stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching enemy ships approach on the screen. His crew was nervous. They had never fought aliens before. "Remember what we learned?" Chris told them. "They fight with formations and discipline. We fight with surprise and fury." The Zephyrian ships moved in perfect lines, just like the textbooks said they would. Admiral Crix had sent a small fleet to teach the humans a lesson. He expected them to run away after seeing superior firepower. Instead, the humans did something no other species had ever tried. They scattered their ships in all directions, making it impossible for the Zephyrians to target them all at once. Then they attacked from angles that made no tactical sense. "What are they doing?" the Zephyrian commander asked his officers. "This formation is completely wrong." That was exactly the point. The USS Vengeance dove straight toward the enemy flagship, ignoring the smaller ships trying to stop it. On any other species ship, this would have been suicide. But Chris Morgan wasn't any other species. "All power to forward weapons," he ordered. "We're going to ram them if we have to." The Zephyrian commander was so shocked by this crazy tactic that he hesitated for a crucial second. That second was all Chris needed. The Vengeance fired every weapon it had directly into the enemy flagship's bridge. The Zephyrian ship exploded in a ball of fire. The other enemy ships panicked, breaking formation for the first time in their military history. The human fleet swarmed them like angry bees. "Target their engines," Captain Nancy Powell ordered from the USS Retribution. "Don't let any of them escape to tell their friends what happened here." The battle lasted only 20 minutes. When it was over, the entire Zephyrian patrol fleet was destroyed. Not a single human ship was lost. Back on Zephyrian command ships, Admiral Crix stared at the battle reports in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "No species fights like this." "Sir," his intelligence officer said carefully, "maybe we should reconsider our approach to the humans." "Never," Crix snarled. "Send more ships. Send 10 times as many. These humans will learn to fear us." But the humans were just getting started. Dr. Angela Torres had been studying the battle footage, and she was excited by what she saw. "Look at this," she told her team. "When human emotions run high, our reaction times get faster. Our creativity increases. We become more dangerous, not less." She developed something called the Fury Protocol. It was a new way of fighting that used human emotions as weapons. Instead of staying calm in battle, human soldiers were taught to channel their anger into focused destruction. Lieutenant Commander Steve Harrison was the first to test the new protocol. His ship, the USS Justice, was attacked by 5 Zephyrian cruisers while patrolling near a human colony. Any other species would have retreated against such odds. Instead, Steve remembered the footage of Valoran children being killed. He remembered Elder Threndal's kind face. He remembered why he was fighting. "All hands," he announced over the ship's intercom. "This is for our friends. This is for the Valoran." The USS Justice fought like a wild animal. It ignored damage to its own hull and focused entirely on destroying the enemy. Steve used tactics that no military academy would teach: ramming attacks, suicide runs, weapons fired at point-blank range. The Zephyrian ships were designed to fight disciplined enemies. They had no idea how to handle a human ship that fought like it was already dead and determined to take everyone with it. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The USS Justice was heavily damaged, but it survived. All 5 Zephyrian cruisers were destroyed. "How did you do it?" Admiral Jake Morrison asked. When Steve made his report, "We stopped fighting like soldiers," Steve replied. "We started fighting like humans." The word spread through the human fleet. Captains began encouraging their crews to embrace their emotions instead of controlling them. They fought with passion, with fury, with love for their fallen friends. Zephyrians had never seen anything like it. Their own soldiers were trained to be calm and efficient. But calm and efficient meant nothing when facing an enemy that fought with the power of pure emotion. Colonel Sandra Mitchell led the first ground assault on a Zephyrian-occupied world. The planet was called Zerion, and it had been under enemy control for 10 years. The native population lived in slavery, working in mines and factories for their conquerors. "We're not just here to fight," Sandra told her troops before the landing. "We're here to free people. Remember that every shot you fire is bringing someone closer to freedom." The assault began at dawn. Human soldiers dropped from the sky in small groups, avoiding the massive formations that other species used. They hit the Zephyrian bases from a dozen different directions at once. The enemy was confused. They had expected a traditional attack, armies marching in lines, tanks advancing across open ground. Instead, they faced human soldiers who appeared everywhere at once, using buildings and terrain in ways that made no military sense. Private Mike Johnson had been a factory worker before the war. Now he was crawling through air ducts to attack. A Zephyrian command center from inside. "This is for the kids," he whispered, thinking of the young Valoran he had seen die on the video. The humans fought with improvised weapons and homemade explosives. They used the environment as a weapon, turning the enemy's own infrastructure against them. When they ran out of bullets, they used rocks. When they ran out of rocks, they used their bare hands. The native population of Zerion had never seen anything like it. For 10 years, they had watched other species try to liberate their world. All of them had fought with proper tactics and advanced weapons. All of them had failed. The humans fought like they were personally offended by the existence of oppression. They took crazy risks to save individual civilians. They charged into certain death to protect people they had never met. "Why do they fight so hard for us?" A Zerian elder asked Sandra after the battle was won. "Because that's what humans do," she replied. "We can't stand to see innocent people hurt." News of the victory spread across the galaxy. Other species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule began to whisper among themselves. Maybe the humans were different. Maybe they actually had a chance. The Corvani were the first to make contact. They were a peaceful trading species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrians 5 years ago. Their leader, Ambassador Vex, sent a secret message to the human fleet. "We can provide intelligence on Zephyrian ship movements," the message said. "In exchange, we ask only for freedom." Soon, other species followed. The Tellurians offered to share their knowledge of Zephyrian technology. The Andromedans provided maps of enemy strongholds. The Centauri gave the humans access to their communication networks. Dr. Gary Lewis, who had been assigned to handle diplomatic relations, was amazed by the response. "They're not just helping us," he told Admiral Morrison. "They're joining us. We've accidentally started a revolution." The Zephyrian Empire began to feel the pressure. Worlds that had been quiet for years suddenly erupted in rebellion. Species that had accepted defeat began to fight back. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were sabotaged. "What is happening?" Admiral Crix demanded. "How did these humans turn the entire galaxy against us?" "They gave them something they had lost," his intelligence officer replied. "Hope." The human fleet continued to grow, not just with human ships, but with vessels from dozens of liberated worlds. Each species brought their own weapons and tactics, but they all fought with the same emotional intensity they had learned from humanity. Captain Amy Rodriguez found herself training alien pilots alongside human ones. "The key is not to think," she told a group of young Corvani. "Feel. Let your anger at injustice guide your actions." The aliens were fascinated by human emotion. They had always been taught that feelings were weaknesses to be controlled. The humans showed them that emotions could be strengths to be embraced. The war was changing both sides. The Zephyrians were becoming more desperate and violent. The humans were becoming more determined and creative. But it was the other species that were changing the most. For the first time in their history, they were learning to fight with passion, instead of just tactics. They were learning that sometimes the right cause was worth dying for. The Battle of Proxima Station became legendary. The station was a major Zephyrian supply depot, heavily defended and thought to be impregnable. Captain Alex Turner led a combined human and alien fleet against it. "We're outnumbered 3-1, his tactical officer reported. "Good," Alex replied. "That means we can attack from more directions." The human fleet did something that no military strategist would recommend. They split their forces into tiny groups and attacked the station from every possible angle. Some ships came from above, others from below. Some attacked the docking bays, while others targeted the communication arrays. The Zephyrians tried to respond, but their rigid command structure couldn't adapt fast enough. They were trained to fight one enemy at a time, not 50 enemies at. Once Commander Julia Reed led the most daring attack. She took her ship, the USS Fury, and pretended to retreat from the battle. The Zephyrians, thinking they had won, began to relax their guard. That was when Julia used the station's own gravity, to slingshot her ship back into the battle at incredible speed. The USS Fury smashed into the station's main reactor. The war had been going on for 2 years when Admiral Crix decided to make his boldest move yet. He would attack the human colony of New Geneva directly, hoping to break human morale once and for all. "If we kill enough of them," he told his officers, "they will surrender like every other species has." New Geneva was a peaceful farming colony on the edge of human space. 3 million humans lived there, growing food for the colonies closer to Earth. They had never expected to become a battlefield. Governor Paul Stevens got the warning just 6 hours before the Zephyrian fleet arrived. He was a former soldier who had retired to become a farmer, but now he would have to fight again. "All civilians to the underground shelters," he announced over the colony's communication system. "All able-bodied adults report to the armory. We have a fight coming." The colonists responded with typical human determination. Teachers became soldiers. Farmers became fighters. Doctors became warriors. Children as young as 16 lied about their ages to join the defense force. They had only basic weapons, hunting rifles, mining explosives, construction equipment. Against a Zephyrian fleet, it should have been hopeless. But the humans of New Geneva had something the enemy didn't expect. They had seen the footage of the Valoran massacre. They knew what Zephyrians did to innocent people. They would rather die fighting than live under occupation. When the enemy ships landed, they found not a surrendering population, but a planet full of angry humans. Every building had been turned into a fortress. Every street had been turned into a trap. Private Sarah Kim had been a school teacher before the war. Now she was hiding in a grain silo with a rocket launcher, waiting for enemy troops to enter. The town square. "This is for my students," she whispered, thinking of the children she had taught before the war. The Zephyrian soldiers expected to march through the colony unopposed. Instead, they found themselves under attack from every direction. Humans shot at them from rooftops, from basements, from hiding places they never would have thought to check. The colonists used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They led enemy patrols into swamps where their heavy armor became useless. They collapsed mine shafts on advancing troops. They used farming equipment as weapons. Ben Davis, a doctor who had never held a weapon before the war, found himself leading a group of civilians in an attack on a Zephyrian supply depot. "We're not soldiers," he told his team, "but we're humans, and humans protect their homes." The battle for New Geneva lasted 3 weeks. Every day, the Zephyrians expected the humans to surrender. Every day, the humans fought back harder than before. Admiral Crix watched the reports with growing frustration. "How are they still fighting?" he demanded. "We've cut off their supplies. We've destroyed their communication systems. Why won't they give up?" "Because they're human," his intelligence officer replied. "They don't fight for governments or empires. They fight for each other." The humans of New Geneva were proving something important to the galaxy. They were showing that ordinary people could become extraordinary when they had something worth fighting for. Meanwhile, the main human fleet was using the distraction at New Geneva to launch their own offensive. Captain Alex Turner led a strike, forced to attack Zephyrian supply lines throughout the sector. While they're busy with the colony, he told his captains, "we're going to cut off their reinforcements. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late." The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, hitting enemy convoys and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They used hit-and-run tactics that drove the Zephyrian commanders crazy. Captain Victor Cruz commanded a ship called the USS Valoran Memorial. It was crewed entirely by survivors of the original massacre, and they fought with a fury that scared even other humans. "Every ship we destroy," Victor told his crew, "brings us one step closer to justice for our friends." The USS Valoran Memorial became famous throughout the galaxy. It would appear suddenly in the middle of enemy formations, destroy several ships, and vanish before the Zephyrians could respond. The crew fought like they were already dead and determined to take as many enemies with them as possible. But the most important battles were happening in the hearts and minds of other species. The defense of New Geneva was being broadcast across the galaxy, and millions of beings were watching humans fight with a determination they had never seen before. On the planet Corvani Prime, a young alien named Zex watched the footage of human farmers fighting Zephyrian soldiers. "Look at them," he told his friends. "They're not even trained warriors, but they're winning." "Winning?" his friend replied. "They're dying." "No," Zex said. "They're making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. They're showing us what courage really looks like." Similar conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds. Species that had given up hope began to remember what it felt like to fight for freedom. Rebellions that had been crushed began to rise again. The Tellurians were the first to openly join the human cause. Their leader, President Mora, made a declaration that shocked the galaxy. "We have watched the humans fight for 2 years," she announced. "We have seen them sacrifice everything for people they barely knew. Today, we join them. Today, we fight." The Tellurian fleet was small but advanced. Their ships had cloaking technology that made them nearly invisible. Combined with human tactics, they became a devastating force. More species followed. The Andromedans contributed their knowledge of Zephyrian psychology. The Centauri provided their expertise in electronic warfare. The Regelians shared their advanced shield technology. Dr. Gary Lewis found himself coordinating a coalition of dozens of species. "This is incredible," he told Admiral Morrison. "We're not just fighting the Zephyrians anymore. We're leading a galactic revolution." The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had expected. On world after world, oppressed, populations were rising up against their Zephyrian overlords. They used human tactics, guerrilla warfare, emotional intensity, and absolute refusal to surrender. The Zephyrian Empire was beginning to crack under the pressure. They had been designed to fight traditional wars against single species. They couldn't adapt to fighting dozens of different enemies using dozens of different tactics. "We need to end this quickly," Admiral Crix told his staff. "If we let it continue, we'll lose everything." He decided to make a desperate gamble. He would take the entire Zephyrian fleet and attack Earth directly. If he could destroy the human home world, Maybe the other species would lose hope and surrender, but the humans had been preparing for this possibility. President Helen Brooks had been working with the military to turn Earth into a fortress. Every human ship in the galaxy was called home to defend their birth world. "Let them come," Admiral Jake Morrison said when he heard about Crix's plan. "We'll be ready." The defense of Earth brought together every human who could fight. Veterans of the Valoran massacre served alongside new recruits. Civilian volunteers worked beside professional soldiers. Even the elderly and disabled found ways to contribute. Captain Amy Rodriguez found herself training pilots who were barely old enough to drive. "I know you're scared," she told them. "But remember, you're not just fighting for Earth. You're fighting for every innocent person in the galaxy." The human fleet assembled in orbit around Earth was the largest in their history. Ships from every human colony, crewed by men and women who had volunteered to die for their home world. But they weren't alone. The Allied fleet included ships from 20 different species, all united by their hatred of oppression and their respect for human courage. "Look at what we've built," Admiral Morrison said as he watched the combined fleet on his screen. "A year ago, we were alone. Now we have friends across the galaxy." The Battle of Earth would be the largest space battle in galactic history. Two massive fleets, representing opposite philosophies, were about to collide in the heart of human space. The Zephyrian fleet arrived in perfect formation, their ships arranged in the precise patterns that had conquered dozens of worlds. They moved with the mechanical precision that had always been their greatest strength. The human and Allied fleet met them with chaos and fury. Ships from different species used different tactics, creating a battle that no strategic computer could predict. "All ships," Admiral Morrison broadcast, "remember why we're here. We're not just defending Earth. We're defending the idea that evil can be defeated." The battle raged for hours. Ships exploded in balls of fire. Brave pilots made suicide runs to protect their friends. Heroes were born and died in the space of minutes. Captain Chris Morgan, veteran of the first human victory, led a desperate attack on the Zephyrian flagship. "For the Valoran," he shouted as his ship dove toward the enemy. The USS Vengeance was destroyed in the attack, but not before it damaged the Zephyrian command ship badly enough to disrupt their entire formation. One by one, the Allied ships pressed their attack. They fought with the emotional intensity they had learned from humanity, turning the cold vacuum of space into a battlefield of passion and fury. Admiral Crix watched his perfect fleet being torn apart by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of war. "This is impossible," he muttered. "How can discipline lose to chaos?" "Because it's not chaos," his intelligence officer replied. "It's love. They're fighting for love." The battle turned when the USS Valoran Me. The final assault on the Zephyrian homeworld began exactly 3 years after the Valoran massacre. Admiral Rachel Parker stood on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Justice Eternal, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. "All ships report ready," her communications officer announced. The fleet included vessels from 43 different species, all united by their hatred of oppression and their respect for human determination. "Remember," Rachel broadcast to the entire fleet, "we're not here for conquest. We're here to end tyranny forever." The Zephyrian homeworld was called Zephyros, a dark planet covered in military installations and weapon factories. It was defended by the last remnants of the Empire's forces, led by General Vex, who had taken command after Admiral Crix's death. "Let them come," Vex told his soldiers. "We will show them what happens when they challenge the master race." But the Zephyrians were no longer fighting a single species. They were fighting an idea, the idea that freedom was worth any sacrifice. And ideas, as they were about to learn, were harder to kill than armies. The battle began with a massive bombardment of the planet's orbital defenses. Human ships used tactics they had learned from 3 years of warfare, hitting the enemy from unexpected angles and using their emotional intensity to overcome superior technology. Captain Tony Martinez led a squadron of converted mining ships against the enemy's main battle station. These ships weren't built for war, he told his crew, but neither were we. Let's show them what humans can do when we're angry. The mining ships, designed to cut through asteroids, proved surprisingly effective against enemy armor. They carved through Zephyrian defenses like hot knives through butter. Meanwhile, Captain Julia Reed's daughter, Lieutenant Sarah Reed, led a squadron of young pilots in a desperate attack on the enemy's communication center. My mother died. Proxima Station, she told her wingman. Today, we finish what she started. The young pilots fought with the same fury that had made their parents legendary. They dove through enemy fire, ignoring their own safety to complete their mission. On the planet's surface, the ground assault was led by General Sandra Mitchell, now a veteran of dozens of battles. Her troops included humans and aliens fighting. Side by side, all of them determined to end the war once and for all. This is it, Sandra told her soldiers as they prepared to land. This is where we make sure no other species ever has to suffer like the Valoran did. The landing was opposed by every remaining Zephyrian soldier on the planet. They fought with the desperation of cornered animals, knowing that defeat meant the end of their empire. But the Allied forces had learned well from human tactics. They fought with passion instead of just discipline. They took risks that made no military sense, but somehow worked anyway. Private Mike Johnson, now a sergeant after 3 years of war, led his squad through the streets of the Zephyrian capital. Remember, he told his men, we're not here to destroy a city. We're here to free the people trapped inside it. The capital was full of slave workers from dozens of species, all of them prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. As the Allied forces advanced, these slaves began to rise up against their captors. The prisoners are helping us, reported Captain Ben Davis, now a veteran combat medic. They're showing us where the enemy's strongholds are. The battle for the capital lasted 2 days. The Zephyrians fought building by building, refusing to surrender even when their cause was hopeless. But the Allied forces had something the enemy didn't: the support of the people they were trying to free. The final battle took place in the Imperial Palace, where General Vex had barricaded himself with his last loyal soldiers. The building was a fortress designed to withstand any assault. But the humans had learned to use their environment as a weapon. They used the palace's own defenses against it, turning security systems into traps and architectural features into weapons. Colonel Kevin Adams, survivor of the original Valoran massacre, led the final assault on the throne room. This is for Elder Threndel, he said as his team prepared to breach the doors. This is for all of them. The throne room battle was brief but intense. General Vex fought like a cornered animal, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. When the smoke cleared, the last leader of the Zephyrian Empire was dead. The war was over. After 3 years of fighting, the galaxy was finally free from the tyranny that had oppressed it for so long. But the real victory came in what happened next. Instead of claiming the Zephyrian worlds for themselves, the humans did something unprecedented. They gave them back to the people who had been enslaved there. President Helen Brooks, now elderly but still strong, addressed the galaxy from the former Imperial Palace. We didn't fight this war for conquest, she said. We fought it for justice. Today, justice is done. The speech was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the humans announced the formation of the Galactic Protection Alliance, a confederation of free species dedicated to preventing another massacre like the one that had started the war. We've learned something important, Helen continued. Evil exists in the universe. but so does good. And when good people work together, evil cannot win. The alliance was different from any government the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't based on conquest or control, but on protection and cooperation. Every species that joined did so voluntarily, and every species had an equal voice. General Patricia Cole was appointed as the first Supreme Commander of the Alliance military. Her job wasn't to conquer new worlds, but to protect the ones that already existed. "We're not empire builders," she told her officers. "We're guardians. Our job is to make sure that what happened to the Valoran never happens again." The Alliance military was unlike any force in galactic history. It was made up of volunteers from dozens of species, all united by their belief that freedom was worth fighting for. The human contribution to the Alliance was unique. They provided not just ships and soldiers, but something more important, the emotional intensity that had made victory possible. Dr. Angela Torres, now the Alliance's chief military psychologist, continued to study the human capacity for righteous fury. "We've learned to channel our emotions into a force for good," she told her colleagues. "This is what makes us special." The Alliance's first major action was the rebuilding of the Valoran settlement on Kepler 442b. The peaceful aliens were gone forever, but their memory would live on in a new way. Admiral Jake Morrison, now retired but still respected, oversaw the construction of the memorial. "This is where it all began," he told the workers. "This is where we learned what we were capable of." The memorial was beautiful, made of crystal that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed almost alive. At its center was a statue of Elder Threndel, his arms spread wide in the same gesture of welcome he had shown to the first human visitors. The inscription at the base read, "They showed us what we could become. We showed the galaxy what we would become to honor them." But the most important part of the memorial was the school built beside it. Young beings from across the galaxy came to learn about the Valoran, about the war, and about the importance of protecting the innocent. Captain Amy Rodriguez, now the school's headmaster, taught students from dozens of species. The Valoran were peaceful, she told her classes. They never hurt anyone, but they were killed anyway, just because they were different. The students listened with wide eyes as she continued. "That's why we exist. That's why the Alliance exists. To make sure that being different is never a reason to die." The school's graduates went on to serve in the Alliance military, carrying with them the lessons of the Valoran massacre. They learned that evil must be stopped, not just defeated. They learned that some fights were worth dying for. Years passed, and the galaxy began to heal. The Alliance grew stronger as more species joined. Trade flourished. Art and culture spread from world to world. The dark age of the Zephyrian Empire became a distant memory, but the humans never forgot. They couldn't forget. It wasn't in their nature to let go of their friends, even dead ones. On the 10th anniversary of the Valoran massacre, a ceremony was held at the memorial. Representatives from every Alliance species attended, along with thousands of human veterans. President Brooks, now very old but still sharp, gave the memorial address. "We gather here not to celebrate war," she said, "but to remember peace. We remember the Valoran not as victims, but as teachers." She paused, looking out at the crowd of humans and aliens standing together. "They taught us that different species could be friends. They taught us that the universe was big enough for everyone. They taught us that love was stronger than hate." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for all who had died in the war. Humans and aliens stood together, remembering not just the Valoran, but all the beings who had sacrificed their lives for freedom. As the crowd dispersed, Admiral Morrison walked through the memorial gardens with his old friend Captain Rodriguez. They were both elderly now, their hair gray and their faces lined with age. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Amy asked. Jake considered the question carefully. I think we did the only thing we could do, he replied. We protected the innocent. We stopped evil. We made the galaxy safer for everyone. They walked in comfortable silence, remembering the friends they had lost and the enemies.